Welcome into Mississippi State Live on the voice of college football. Andrew Miller and Christian Ballard here on a Tuesday night, different night for us than we typically would record. We adjusted our schedule a little bit for the holiday season because, hey, it's Christmas Eve tomorrow, and we're not going to have a show later in the week. Also, I had already done a show Sunday night. Christian had stuff going on Monday, so we didn't really want to go back-to-back days. But this is going to be the only show we do this week. And because of that, we're going to go ahead and get into some bowl preview stuff. We're going to talk about Mississippi State's bowl opponent in Wake Forest because we really haven't taken a look at the Demon Deacons just yet. So this is going to be kind of our full breakdown of the opponent, maybe some early thoughts on how Mississippi State might match up with Wake Forest. And hopefully the next time we get together, it'll be more of a true preview for the game and look at what are our expectations, who are the guys we expect to have key roles in that matchup. So that's kind of the thought for the next couple of episodes. But this one really focusing on taking a look at Wake Forest, getting to know our opponent. As you were tuning in, if you could leave us a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, turn that notification bell on so you do know when we do go live. And, if you could share the stream, tell people about us, get those subscribers up, we would certainly appreciate that. Christian, how is it going?
It's going good, Andrew. Hope everyone out there is doing great. Merry Christmas to everybody, and hope everyone gets to celebrate as best as they can, I guess. But looking forward to the rest of bowl season, and we got January 2nd, the Duke's Mayo Bowl. So I'm obviously very excited to see what Mississippi State can do, and hopefully we get a good game from Wake Forest too.
I would hope for not a good game out of Wake Forest, but I mean, sure, in a competitive ball game, at least something that can be fun to watch. There is that, and we've had a couple okay games through the bowl season to this point.
Yeah.
A lot of games have not been all that competitive, which I have not been able to watch as much as I would like, just because it feels like all these games are happening in the middle of me having to do something else. So I haven't been able to keep as close tabs on a lot of the games as I would have liked to or previously would have, but I do have the New Orleans Bowl going off to my side right now with the Mustard Buzzards of Southern Miss taking on my beloved Western Kentucky Hilltoppers. Shout out to Air Raid U. Right now, the Mustard Buzzards have the lead, though, so not going well for my beloved Toppers. Don't have a ton of news to get into to start the show. And it's probably not going to be that deep of an episode, although every time we say that, we end up going a lot longer than we're expecting. But just not a lot has happened from a Mississippi State standpoint since we last gathered. But do have a few more transfer portal additions. Running back Johnny Daniels makes it official. Look, that's a talented player in Starkville who back in 2024 was basically Mississippi State's co-starter at running back alongside Devon Booth. Carried it 108 times, 540 yards, averaged right at 5 yards a carry, had 4 touchdowns. It was a really good player for State in the backfield. Didn't have a 100-yard game, but went for 92 against UMass. Had a good touchdown had touchdowns against Tennessee, against UMass, a touchdown in the Georgia game, a touchdown in the Florida game. Had a impressive performance against Texas 2 years ago. He's a good player and was a really nice addition for State at JUCO ranks going into the 2024 season. And he had a good year for the Bulldogs in 2024, and you were expecting him to have another good year in 2025. But with Devon Booth returning, you add Fluff Bothwell, and you kind of knew, okay, right there, Booth and Bothwell, because Booth had separated by the end of 2024 as the best back on the roster at that time. You knew with Fluff Bothwell coming in that that was probably going to be your 1-2 punch at running back leading the way. And while Lebby has had a running back by committee approach throughout the past, and you definitely could have 3 backs that contribute. Once you get past your top 2, typically going to be tough to see a lot of even carries. And we also get Xavier Gayton in the room, who had shown some flashes in 2024, who ultimately moved ahead of Daniels on the depth chart. And, for this season, Daniels only played in 3 games. He had 4 carries for 28 against Southern Miss. I believe one of those runs was a really impressive carry, if I remember correctly. Didn't get a rush against Arizona State, carried it 5 times for 16 yards against Alcorn, and at that point kind of shut it down. And it was one of those deals where you kind of saw the writing on the wall and understood that if he wanted to be able to close out his college career the way he would like to, it probably was not going to be at Mississippi State this year, wasn't going to see the role he wanted. So he ultimately chose to sit out the rest of the year, take the red shirt. And he'll go and play his final year of eligibility elsewhere. Although he was a JUCO product, and this time of of college football. JUCO guys seem to get countless years of eligibility, so maybe he'll get it a couple other years elsewhere. But look, I don't fault him whatsoever. He's a good player. I think he could either be a superstar at the G5 level, or if he got an opportunity in a power conference room as a number 2 back, or a guy kind of splitting carries, I think he could do well. He showed it already at Mississippi State. So, no ill will towards Johnny Daniels, and we'll see where he ultimately lands next. Tyler Woodard at safety hits the portal, a guy that had to play again quite a bit for Mississippi State in 2024 on a state defense that just was not all that good, and didn't have a terrible season, I would say. He was a contributor in the secondary, but I guess on 2024, I forgot he only played 4 games. I thought he played more than that. I'm mistaken. I thought Tyler Woodard had more action in 2024 than he did. Yeah. I didn't only played 4 games that year. Well, he only played 2 games this season. And again, safety was one of those positions where State had more guys step in and step up. I don't think he's a bad player, but going to go elsewhere. Also entering the portal, Dwight Lewis, the third transfer corner that State brought in this year out of the NAIA ranks. He played at Marion University. That was an interesting addition when Mississippi State brought him in. A guy that at 6'2", 190, felt like he had a good frame. He was a productive corner at the NAIA level and was receiving power conference interest. North Wisconsin and Arizona were other schools that were interested in getting Dwight Lewis to step in. Mississippi State landed him. You thought, okay, maybe that's a guy that can come in and compete for a starting role, and did play for some for the Bulldogs this year, but ultimately just was not quite ready to make that jump up to the SEC level. We'll see where he ultimately lands. He's going to have to apply for another year of eligibility because he was a senior, but again, this is one of those deals where guys are just, if a guy has an opportunity to apply for another year of eligibility, he's going to apply. That's just the era that we're in. Finally, defensive lineman Ashun Shepard, another guy who gets in the portal, who again had to play for Mississippi State a lot in 2024, and showed some flashes, showed some moments in 2024 as a part of a pretty poor defensive line group that, he showed some flashes that season and that he could be an okay player, but this year kind of got recruited over. You brought more guys into the portal to step in and kind of filled that role. So he'll be off elsewhere. Again, when we look at the portal for State to this point, you've not really suffered any losses that you consider to be significant. You would prefer to still have Stonka Burnside because of the potential if you could develop him. And, I know that's an ongoing conversation whether or not Mississippi State's going to be able to get him back in the fold. You would prefer to have Tony Mitchell, again, because it's a talented player to have there as a depth piece in your secondary, or someone that, look, for this bowl game, Isaac Smith is not going to be in the bowl game because he got off-season surgery. So he would be starting in that role. You would like to have him against Wake Forest, but, ultimately he's choosing to move on. Jimothy Lewis is a guy that you would like to have on the roster because, again, what is the potential for him if he could finally break out as a big-time offensive lineman that he's got the athleticism to, but the refinement of the skill set is not quite there yet. You've lost a couple guys that you would, in a perfect world, like to still see on the roster. You have not yet lost someone that was a key contributor on this team. Or a player that, even if they did play a lot, is someone that you felt like, well, that's a loss Mississippi State cannot afford to lose. A player Mississippi State cannot afford to lose. So, obviously, we'll see. Things can change constantly in the portal, as we know that. Guys will say they're coming back, and then they'll go elsewhere. But it is certainly possible that you see Mississippi State lose someone they would not like to down the line. But for the time being, the portal has not been all that bad for Mississippi State thus far. Only other little bit of news, I know Steve Robertson reported over on Gene's page today that cowbells will not be allowed at the Duke's Mayo Bowl. I know they were allowed the last time State played in Charlotte back in 2015 for Dak Prescott's final game. Little weird. I don't know the last time a bowl game didn't have cowbells, but I guess State will have to cheer on the Bulldogs without them in Charlotte. Christian, what's your stance on that? Should the cowbells have been allowed? Do we need to boycott the Mayo Bowl because they are not letting State fans bring in cowbells?
No, we shouldn't just boycott our bowl game or anything like that just because of that. However, I think people out there need to toughen up and ring the bell.
It's weird. I don't know what led to that decision. Maybe it's a case of MSU being an APR team and not being an SEC bowl game, but State fans got to take cowbells to the St. Pete Bowl back in 2016. So I don't know what the situation is here, but it is what it is. State fans will have to go without ringing the bells. But I'm not expecting a ton of State fans to be in attendance. I'm not expecting a ton of Wake Forest fans to be in attendance, if we're being completely honest, because it's the day after. It's the day after New Year's Day. It's a further trip for State fans to some of the other bowl games, and I don't know if Charlotte. And this is not me taking a dig at the city of Charlotte. I've never been. I would like to visit. I don't know if it's the same destination that maybe some of the Florida bowls would typically be, or then you have the games in Tennessee that are in close proximity to Starkville that are quick trips. So I don't think there's going to be a big contingent of Bulldog fans on hand, but for those that are there, you will have to rest your bell and just yell. And remember to yell like HELL, as we say. Let's talk about that bowl game a little bit. We'll look at the Wake Forest Demon Deacons, and this is a program that had been in a good spot for several seasons. Dave Clausen was a fantastic coach there. Had a really nice, successful run. Kind of took over the program at a time where, I think it was I don't know if they had somebody else in there other than Jim Grobe beforehand. Obviously, Jim Grobe had been very successful there, but kind of things had faded. But look, after a couple down years to start, Clausen, who had been, again, a successful coach at Bowling Green, really starts to build it up. And he got to a point where they went to 7 straight bowl games. In 2021, they won 11 games and played for the ACC championship. Very, very successful tenure for Dave Clausen during that time, and really built a stable program. I know they were talked about a lot for the way that they would build their roster and the roster retention that they had at the time, which, of course, again, this is all pre-portal, so roster retention is not the same thing. But, they always took an approach of getting old and staying old. They would bring young guys into the program, and I don't care how talented you are as a true freshman, you're redshirting, and you are going to develop for a year. You're going to learn what we do, and what we're going to end up with is a starting lineup every single year consisting of a bunch of juniors and seniors. So even when we're losing players, we have guys who have been in the program for 3-4 years to this point. And that's how Clausen was able to keep Wake Forest competitive despite the disadvantage that they're at relative to a lot of other teams at the power conference level, because it is a smaller academic school and they're not going to attract the type of talent that other programs did. But Clausen had a great run. However, things started to fade. His last 2 years, back-to-back 4-8 seasons. And that was kind of one of those questions of like, okay, Wake Forest in the modern era, is this a program that can be successful moving forward for the things I talked about, being a small academic school at a time where now it's about NIL and it's about the transfer portal? How are you going to be able to manage that moving forward? And I think, Clausen was a guy I think could have continued to coach. He chooses to step away and retire. Although I think he took on an administrative role within the program. But you go out and get Jake Dickert from Washington State, who had done a great job taking over there, kind of in the midst of a weird situation with Nick Rolovich in the post-Leach era. Dickert had done a really nice job at Wazoo. They had a lot of success, won some games, and came into this situation, though, kind of like having to replace a lot. They had some pieces on the back end of the defense that were returning, but they were going to need a quarterback. All of their top receivers hit the portal. The entire offensive line either graduated or hit the portal. All their top defensive linemen graduated. The best corner that they had hit the portal. You had a lot of key players that left Wake Forest from 2024 into 2025. And because of that, Dickert kind of had his work cut out for him. But he goes out, he adds 35 transfers, almost entirely from the G5 ranks. Guys that were, again, playing in the Mountain West, guys who were playing at Washington State alongside Dickert, guys from the FCS, a bunch of transfers from lower levels, bring them in. And I think they hit on a lot of them, which is really a testament to the evaluation of coaching because, Christian, if we look, this ended up being a pretty successful season for Wake Forest.
Absolutely. You mentioned the additions that they got through the portal, and obviously a lot of them from lower level group of 5 type stuff, FCS level. Also got Robbie Ashford, though, who's been a couple different places. I know one of them being Auburn, I think, was his previous stop, and they
He's
got
on his
him in a
fourth school.
quarterback.
What's that? He's on his 4th school. That is previous Ole Miss commit, Oregon
Right.
football signee, Auburn football
Auburn.
quarterback,
Yeah.
starting quarterback,
Yeah.
and then South Carolina backup quarterback before becoming a starter at Wake Forest. Robbie Ashford, Mississippi
It's
State
like
has
five
faced Robbie
schools.
Ashford in 2022. Robbie Ashford was the starting quarterback in Starkville with a Cadillac Williams-led Auburn team coming to Starkville. State won the
Yeah.
game.
I mean, it's just one of those guys where you're like, how does he keep playing? He's almost 50 and all that stuff. But yeah, Robbie Ashford, I mean, I think he's good. I just, whatever's happened with him having to leave and bounce around and all that, I mean, obviously he's probably not the best in the game, but I feel like he could be serviceable wherever he ends up.
Well, he's done at this point, but he has been serviceable
Yeah.
for Wake Forest this season. But I know you were taking a look at this team, how the season played out. What did 2024, at least 2025, at least the regular season look like for Wake Forest?
Well, obviously, with Robbie Ashford at quarterback, 2,169 passing yards. That at least led the team. They did have a 500-yard receiver in Chris Barnes. They had Damon Claiborne, the running back, 907 rushing yards, just shy of 1,000. So, I mean, had really good offense, I thought, and I felt like they had good run game, good receivers to throw the ball to. So overall, I think offensively, you look at Wake Forest, and it's just like, um, I mean, just give them credit where it's due. They look like a really good football team.
Well, it was a 8-4 season for the debut
Right.
for Wake Forest this year, for Jake Dickert, which is the most regular season wins Wake had since that 2022 season. I think 2021 was the 11-win year. 2022, I think, was also an 8-5 type year, where they went to a bowl game, which that was the last time going to a bowl. 8-4, 4-4 in conference play. And look, they went 4-1 in one-score games, and that certainly helps a lot. The one loss was an overtime to Georgia Tech on a failed 2-point attempt. So, look, could this have easily been a team that missed a bowl? Possibly, but I mean, they beat a 10-win UVA team that played for the conference title. They beat a pretty good SMU team. And those were two games where defensively they shut them down. I know Christian talked about the offense a little bit, and there's flashes and there's pieces on the offense, although they're going to have a couple key pieces out in this game, as we'll get to here in just in a bit. But defensively, they've been incredibly impressive this year. And some of
Yeah.
the defensive performances they've been able to put together really stand out. So 8 wins, it's always going to be a fantastic season at Wake Forest. But to do that in year one for Jake Dickert, when you're talking about a team that the past 2 years was, 4-8, and year one he steps in with all the pieces they lost, and again they lost, like some of the offensive linemen they lost went to power conference programs. The receivers they lost went to power conference programs. Their corner was a power conference transfer, and again, having to replace all the trenches to step in immediately and be an 8-win team. And I know the ACC people laugh about it, but I mean, they didn't play a super easy schedule. Virginia, Georgia Tech, SMU, all good football teams. To win 8 games at Wake Forest, that's a great job. And again, it's that testament to Jake Dickert. He is a fantastic football coach. And overturning the roster, getting the immediate results, you have to be impressed with the job that he was able to do. This is a well-coached team that Mississippi State is going to face in Charlotte. Taking a little bit of a closer look, we'll go to the defensive side of the ball because that's really what leads the team. That they are a team that kind of wins with defense. 21.5 points per game allowed, which is 6th in the ACC. 322 yards per game allowed, which is 4th in that conference. They were 5th in the ACC in pass defense, 2nd in the ACC in tackles per loss per game at over 7. The red zone touchdown percentage, they give up just 50%. So on red zone trips, only scoring on touchdowns every other trip down there, which you will take that as a defense. It's really solid. The fewest 20-plus yard pass plays allowed in the ACC this season. And I've mostly talked about pass defense, but rush defense, they've been perfectly solid as well. Had some games where they've given up some rush yards, but overall really solid. There's not a single defensive statistic you look at, whether it be, again, rushing defense, third down percentage allowed, none of that stuff where they are bad. They are at worst average in pretty much every defensive statistic to this point. And when you get into the advanced stats, they're above average. They are 21st in defensive EPA allowed, and they are 11th in defensive success rate allowed. So both in terms of the efficient plays and then on a down by down basis, they have been outstanding defensively. And as I mentioned, um, they showed up against some really good offenses. They held Virginia to 9 points. They held SMU to 12 points. The most yards per game they allowed on the season was just 421 to Florida State. And that was a game that went poorly for them. 42-7 loss to the Noles, and Florida State averaged about 7.4 yards per play. That was a rough night for them defensively, but only 14 first half points allowed to Florida State. Things just kind of spiraled for them in that game. They've been really solid throughout the year, and it's a group that is going to be a test for a Mississippi State offense that has obviously been very inconsistent throughout the year, and obviously is going to have a true freshman quarterback starting in. Sven coming in with a Hail State. Haven't heard from Sven in a while. Shout out to you. Law and Tractor Life. Giving a shout out to Ballard. So some of his buddies here in the chat. Yeah. Again, this is a really good defense that you have from Wake Forest. And obviously they've got some outstanding players. Langston Hardy at the edge position, a transfer out of UConn, been fantastic. 7 sacks on the season, 17 tackles for loss, which is tied for the lead in the ACC. Another 8 quarterback hurries. As a pass rush as a whole, they are only averaging a little over 2 sacks per game. So it's not like a group that just constantly harasses quarterbacks. But a guy like Hardy is someone who can definitely live in the backfield and definitely get pressure. For a Mississippi State team that kind of has struggled at the tackle spot, that could be a little bit concerning here. In the secondary, got a pair of all ACC DBs and safety Nick Anderson and corner Karan Prunty. Anderson, 94 tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss, 7 passes broken up. Prunty, 34 tackles, 8 passes broken up, and an interception. You also have nickelback Devon Patterson, who's had good numbers. Linebacker Dylan Hazen, again, kind of one of those fringe all-ACC guys. I think he was like an all-ACC honorable mention. Had a really solid season. There are fantastic players at every single level of this defense. It's going to be a group that's tough for State to contend with, and they're an attacking defense. I mentioned early on, second in the ACC in tackles for loss per game. This is a group that wants to get after you. Scotty Hazelton, the defensive coordinator previously at Michigan State, he also spent a year at Texas as an assistant last year. His name of the game, it's to create as much confusion as possible. It's confusion and disruption. That's what they're looking to do. They're going to do a ton of simulated pressures where they're bringing a bunch of guys up to the line, showing pressures and then dropping out of it, but mixing up, okay, who's coming and who's backing off. They're going to rotate the safeties. And, I mentioned you got one of those safeties with 94 tackles. They're going to get their safeties downhill involved in the run game. The linebackers like to attack. The defensive line, like I said, it's not a group that's crazy with the pass rush, but they are really disruptive up front, especially in run defense, where they're going to find ways to fight through blocks. And obviously this aggression at times can work against them, but they don't get gashed for a lot of big plays either. So really, they do a great job of creating as much confusion as possible. And look, I mentioned they had success against some really talented offenses this year. It's going to be a big test for the Mississippi State offense. State's offensive line is going to have a big game to really do a good job of protecting Kamario Taylor. But, the big thing for me, what I'm kind of excited about here is I think this is a great test for Kamario Taylor going up against a defense that is as good as Wake Forest, that is going to throw as much at him as Wake Forest will. That's a great test for the young quarterback. And look, I don't want to do the whole thing. This game doesn't matter. But if Mississippi State loses this game, if Mississippi State gets blown out, it's kind of just, all right, it is what it is. Christian, this is still going to be a great learning opportunity for Kamario Taylor getting to go up against this defense.
Win or lose, no doubt, man. I mean, I think it's going to be great for Kamario Taylor, like you say, just going up against a pretty solid defense in Wake Forest. And, I think Mississippi State fans with Kamario Taylor, I think if they're smart, I think we know he's the guy at quarterback. We just got to see him against really good competition. And even against the lower tier, if he comes in and looks good, or if, he played a couple group of 5 type games in his career already. But, whoever he goes up against, we just want to see the best out of him and hope that he can be the guy to lead this Bulldog offense.
No doubt about it. And look, again, it's going to be a big test for him early on, but I like that. It's a big learning opportunity. This whole bowl game is a learning opportunity for Mario Taylor, that you get a whole month, 15 practices with him as the starter in bowl practices, which obviously he got to be the starter leading into the Egg Bowl and got those practices. But I don't even think – I think the way Levy talked about it, because they had a bye week before the Egg Bowl, I think there's the fact that you were able to – I think he only got 1 week, because I don't think that decision was made until halfway through the year. I'm missing here. Halfway through that prep for the Egg Bowl, that he was ultimately named the starter. So he's getting a full week here, which is huge. Spin bringing up, Wake has nobody on the schedule he can call good outside of Georgia Tech. Duke put near 50 program. I think we're a better team. We'll handle them without problems. Virginia is legitimately good. That's a top 25 team. SMU, I think SMU is a good football team. I understand SMU kind of had a weird year, but SMU is a good football team. They shut down both of those offenses. Two offenses that I would say are better than Mississippi State's. Georgia Tech, you look at the final stat line, Georgia Tech finished with a fine day. Georgia Tech had 3 points at halftime in that game. So they did fine against Georgia Tech in that matchup as well. Yes, there's a lot of teams on there. They're not particularly good. Florida State blowing them out. And, NC State was not a great football team. There was a bowl team, but they lose by 10 at home in that game. The Duke game was weird. They outgained Duke by a lot. They put up a lot more yards on Duke than they allowed, but still got the loss there. I believe some turnovers played a role in that matchup. I don't entirely know for sure. But, I think they're still a pretty good football team. If you give Wake our schedule, they go 3-9. Maybe. I don't know. I think, I'm not saying they would definitely go for a bowl game, but I think they're good enough. They would have found – they could beat Arkansas. I'm not saying that they couldn't beat somebody else. And also, State's non-conference opponents this year, like Arizona State ended up not being just incredible. Like if they can beat Virginia and SMU, like they could beat Arizona State. I think they definitely beat Southern Miss. They definitely beat NIU. Ended up being terrible. They're going to beat Alcorn. So and I think they could have beaten Arkansas, and they could have. I wouldn't rule them out beating Florida. I think they're I'm not saying they're an incredible football team. And look, Mississippi State, to be clear, is the favorite in this game. The numbers like Mississippi State better, but I think Wake probably is. They're pretty similarly rated to Mississippi State in terms of results. I don't think they're a 3-9 football team against this slate. So look, it's a defense again that has been really solid throughout the year. It's going to be a big test for Mississippi State and big test for Mario Taylor. But look, State's guys are going to have to step up for sure and kind of rally around him. When you go to the other side of the ball, it's kind of been an up and down year. So for the season, Wake Forest has averaged about 27 points per game, a little bit below. Not putting up a ton of yardage, 389 yards per game, but at 5.9 yards per play, which 5.9 yards per play is fine, nothing incredible. I know Christian held a few of these guys earlier. Robbie Ashford in at quarterback, 2,169 yards, 59% completions, 7.5 yards per attempt, 9 touchdown passes to 7 picks. He has also run for 504 yards and 7 rushing touchdowns. Ashford is a very up and down player, which you see it for a guy who's obviously a former 4-star recruit coming out of high school, was a big time signee at the time, who has had to bounce around quite a bit. He's on his 4th program. You see some moments where you kind of see that talent that he had coming out with the mobility and some of the arm talent that he has. But obviously you also see some throws where it's just off target and just is not consistent being able to throw the football down the field. He's a former baseball player, and you kind of see that in the way that he throws it. Like everything is just a rocket on a line. He does not put air under the football pretty much every time I watch him. And the result is like he will like go between an incredible pass fit into a tight window downfield to then like completely missing or putting one in the dirt. So he definitely has had those inconsistencies with his arm. They don't throw downfield a ton, and can get if they can get some one-on-one, but for the most part, it's working the short to intermediate game. They like to roll him out a lot. and try to give him some quicker throws and keep it to where it's like more an easy picture for him. And also by rolling him out, you get that opportunity. If he can use his legs and run a little bit, that's a big factor for them. Complimenting him in the backfield, and this is going to be a key in this game, has been running back Damon Claiborne, who on the year ran for 907 yards, over 5 yards per carry, had 10 rushing touchdowns, was also a solid receiver out of the backfield. Very talented player and a guy that I've seen some talk as an NFL draft prospect, and maybe being one of the better running backs available in the upcoming draft. He, it appears, is going to be opting out of this bowl game. I don't think it was made like official, but I believe the way that Jake Dicker, the head coach, kind of spoke about it makes it sound like he's not going to be ready to go or not going to be able to go in this game. He's declaring for the draft, and he's going to use this as an opportunity for bowl prep. That's a significant loss. That is a massive loss for them because he has been far and away their best offensive player, and really no one else has come close. Ashford, like I said, has been a good number in the run game, but their number 2 back, Ty Clark, he's only run it 58 times for 232 yards, 3 touchdowns, 4 yards per carry. Has not been involved much. And they're losing some of their other depth guys in the running back room. They're not going to have a ton there. I'm not saying they don't have capable guys, but look, it's not a special offensive line up front either. This is a rushing attack that averages about 4.5 per carry, 157 yards per game. They've done a good job from a sacks allowed standpoint. On the season, they have only given up 16 sacks. Now, some of that is Ashford being able to make guys miss with his legs, but they've done and like I said, I mentioned some of it is the quick passing. They don't do a ton of sitting around in the pocket, but the O-line has played solid this season. It's been an okay group, but it's not a group of guys who are just paving the way. Claiborne has had to make a lot of those runs happen. So for them to probably not have him in this game, that's a big loss for their offense. And it's not the only significant loss. When you look at their receiving core, their top receiver in Chris Barnes, who's a transfer out of Washington State, he was their starting slot receiver, 39 catches, 547 yards, 3 touchdowns. Now, he was not like the go-to guy. They had several other receivers who were kind of in, not several other, but a few other receivers who were kind of in a similar range. Carlos Hernandez was right behind him in terms of production. Sterling Burkhalter, another guy who had decent numbers. Sawyer Racanelli was very impressive in their final game against Duke, so that's a guy who could step in. But Barnes is their top receiver, and moving on. They're also losing Micah Mays Jr., who to the portal, who's a very talented young receiver, who was probably one of their more explosive guys in the receiving core. In fact, over nearly 17 yards per reception, was definitely one of their big play guys at receiver that they have hit in the portal. They do have their top tight end back in Filet, who's, again, a solid player. They've got a decent group of pass catchers, but some of their more talented guys are going to be stepping out. Wake Forest, obviously, look, it's not been a great offense this year. We know Mississippi State has at times struggled to deal with teams that are going to run the football well, but with Claiborne out, top receiver out, I mean, I know State's got some guys going on defense, but this is kind of an early test for a lot. Talked about an early test for Camario. It's an early test for a lot of guys on State's defense too. A defense that was so poor throughout the season, especially the back half of the year. I know Zach Arnett's not calling the defense, but going to be a little bit of a different approach with no Coleman Hutzler on the sidelines. I'm hoping to see a lot of guys step up and have a good game against a not so great offense and kind of show like, hey, we could be foundational pieces next season.
I would agree. I think that you always want that in the postseason. I think there's a difference between, taking that risk with the young players for a bowl game that's just going to give you a trophy versus, let's say if it's prep for the trophy of the national championship, So I don't know, man. I think that, um, there's teams, like I said, in the postseason, and some of them take it seriously, some don't. And overall, you just kind of, I don't know. I'm kind of lost there, but I think you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, look, and I think Wake Forest is going to take this game perfectly seriously. An opportunity for a 9-win season, which would only be the second time in several years because, again, they had that 11-win year in 2021. But for as good as Dave Clawson was, his 8-win teams all kind of finished 8-5. So a 9-win season would be a big deal at Wake Forest. That's not something that happens there all that much within their history or even in the modern era. I think they're going to be locked in. And Wake Forest, to be clear, I know there's a couple opt-outs I talked about there offensively, but the defense, it's only one guy. One guy on defense in terms of guys who are contributors. The only contributor defensively that I know is opting out of this game is Mateen, a big robe guy. Sorry, I cannot pronounce that. I completely botched that. He's a defensive tackle who had 21 tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, a couple sacks, forced fumble, did have a blocked kick. This is a good player, but he was a backup. He was not one of their starting defensive linemen. Their starting D-line is going to be intact in this game. They're going to have their offensive line. They're going to have most of their starting receiving core minus the leader. They're going to have their quarterback. So they're still going to have a lot of key pieces in place, a couple big-time playmakers on offense. But still, most of this team in place, I think Wake Forest definitely is looking at this as an opportunity for themselves is to get some more momentum and cap off a really strong year in year one of Jake Dicker to try to keep that rolling. But if you're Mississippi State, again, this is a big opportunity for you for momentum. And Sven brings up most important of those 15 extra practice days. That's huge for us. Yeah, for sure. That's the biggest part of this game is that you're getting a whole other month of practice. And regardless of how the game plays out, to get this time leading into the transfer portal, because that's the other key thing here is that the portal has not opened. Now, obviously, for every single team, we've seen plenty of players announce their intentions to hit the portal. And Mississippi State's already had 20-plus players make their intentions known to do so. Although I do know there is the note. We didn't bring it up earlier. Linebacker Fat Forrest, it does sound like he will be returning to Mississippi State. That was a report from Steve Robertson that I saw. So that's big to have him. He said he was going to hit the portal. Good to have him back, especially because of the relationship there with Tyler Lockhart, who has already announced he will be back for MississippiTate next season, who's obviously a promising young linebacker who impressed a lot this year. And Tyler Lockhart, a guy that I would hope goes out and has a big game. Probably going to need to have a big game. A guy who's tracking down Robbie Ashford throughout this matchup because somebody's got to be able to keep tabs on him, especially with no Isaac Smith in. Who are you going to turn it over to? You're hoping one of those linebackers can be a guy that can make some plays in this one and kind of keep him contained. But yeah, you get these 15 extra practices, and that's 15 opportunities for a lot of guys to show, hey, you don't need to hit the portal hard at this spot. We're talking about Mississippi State right now. We did a recent episode where we talked about the biggest needs in the transfer portal. And, one of the big ones we would have talked about is just, for example, receiver. Receiver is going to be a big need for them. Well, what if some of these other receivers have a huge game and step up and show you some opportunity, show you some flashes there? You then suddenly feel good about the receiver group going into the transfer portal, and maybe you don't feel like it's as necessary a need. Safety, it's going to be tough because you're losing a lot of guys at safety, and frankly, the guys that are going to be playing in this game are guys who you're going to be losing regardless because they're out of eligibility. But if you can have a younger safety put together a good game in this one, do you feel better about that group going into next year? And just if you can get some answers. So that definitely makes this a very important stretch for MSU, and you're hoping they can go out and put together a good game. Look, I think defensively, it's really going to come down to, and defensively for Mississippi State, containing Ashford, not letting him kill you with your legs, and then just sort of keep everything in front of you. This is, again, it's not been an offense that's been particularly explosive, not an offense that can do much in the pass game. And at the top running back out, I don't really know what there is for this group to lean on. Really just don't let Ashford beat you with his legs. I think that's going to be a big key. And then other side of the ball for State's offense, take advantage of Wake Forest aggressiveness. Wake Forest is going to be an aggressive attacking team. Find ways to use that against them and make some plays there. And, hopefully Kamario Taylor is able to turn in some big plays. But I expect this to be a low-scoring battle. I think State's like a 2.5-point favorite. If you go at some of the advanced metrics, College Football Graphs has Mississippi State as a projected winner, 24.4 to 22. So a very tight game and a not particularly high-scoring game is sort of what's projected there. This should be a fun matchup in Charlotte to kick off the new year. That's going to do it for us tonight, and that's going to be our only episode of the week, as we already mentioned. Obviously, with Christmas and the holidays, not going to get back together here later in the week, but we wanted to make sure we did show here early in the week to break down the opponent. Hopefully, you were able to learn something about Wake Forest before we see that team again. Obviously, we'll be back a week from now. I don't know if it's going to be Monday or Tuesday. We'll figure out the exact day next week, but going to be kind of the same plan next week with the New Year's holiday. Probably not going to really do anything on New Year's Eve. That wouldn't be the plan to, or New Year's Day for that matter. So kind of the same plan next week. We'll do something early in the week, and that's going to be kind of our predictions for the bowl game. We will take a look at so obviously State plays the bowl on Friday, January 2nd. So we will make our predictions. We'll have a full breakdown. See if I can get a Wake Forest guest on. That'd be great if we could have someone to come and break down the Demon Deacons a little bit and tell us what to expect from this team. But yeah, the next episode will be a full breakdown preview of Mississippi State's bowl game. And if there's any other news until then, we will certainly get into it. Hope everybody has a fantastic Christmas. If you have not already, please leave us a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, turn the notification bell on so you do know we do go live. And as always, swing your sword, Hail State, and Merry Christmas.
College football is even more exciting when you've got some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread, and I've got a 40-plus year track record. 11-0 in the college football playoff for me last year against the money line, 8-3 against the spread. And I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill of Wager Talk is our ace in the hole, show stopper. 7 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick. 28-12 against the spread the last 3 years. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Corey Bratta, Matt Zemek, and Steve Dace. Check out those numbers. Become a YouTube or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and then select the betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2025 a winner now.